This week on The Inside Story, the U.S. immigration dilemma, the end of a pandemic-era emergency health order. With Title 42 now gone, the worry is that a surge of migrants will overwhelm U.S. border officials' ability to manage them safely and humanely. What are lawmakers in Washington doing to address a long-troubled immigration policy? Plus, a Ukrainian immigrant opens a health clinic for fellow immigrants in need. Now, the Inside Story, the U.S. immigration dilemma.
Hello and welcome to The Inside Story. I'm Carolyn Pursuti, VOA Senior Washington Correspondent. There is uncertainty and frustration at the U.S. southern border as COVID-era immigration restrictions expire and migrants begin crossing into the United States. Some are looking to find family already here. Some are fleeing from repressive governments and looking for asylum. Some just want to find jobs, make money, and support their loved ones, both here and back home. Whatever the reason, the hundreds of thousands of people who cross the southern border from Mexico into the U.S. leave their homes behind and travel hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to get here. Many are willing to break the law to enter this country. Many who want to follow the rules are confused as they look for any clear path towards starting a new life. Today, we try to understand what's going on at the U.S. border, as well as look back to see how we got to where we are today, all on this edition of The Inside Story. Title 42 was never meant to be a long-term solution for America's troubled immigration system. The recently expired emergency health order used during the pandemic at the U.S. Mexico border allowed for rapid deportation of migrants back to their home countries. But now what? VOA's immigration correspondent Eleni Barros was at the South Texas border when Title 42 expired.
The future of migrants waiting in Mexico for a chance to cross into the United States is uncertain. As new immigration measures are being rolled out, questions arise. Title 42, a pandemic-era health measure, allowed for the quick expulsion of migrants back to Mexico or their home countries. Now with its ending, migrants are confused about what to do next. The Biden administration announced new asylum restrictions, but people like Priscila Horta, who is an immigration lawyer in Brownsville, Texas, have been crossing the border into Matamoros, Mexico every week to explain to migrants the process they're about to face.
If you enter under any other circumstance besides the app or at a pre-scheduled appointment, you will not be considered eligible for asylum, which, having worked day in and day out with people who are waiting, especially here in Matamoros, that is precisely what they're seeking, an opportunity to be heard for asylum.
Horta is advising migrants to use the CBP One app to secure an appointment and letting them know that if they cross without authorization, they will be removed immediately. But even with the extra 1,000 appointments available on the CBP One app, people are waiting for some time. Nerissa Ruas is a Cuban migrant waiting on the Mexican side with her husband and 2 small children.
The same. There is no space. We are desperate. We don't know what to do.
Ruas arrived in Matamoros a month ago and is still not sure when her family will be able to present themselves at a port of entry. She was an accountant in Cuba. If she crosses to the U.S., she has plans for the future.
Entrepreneur and to get ahead, to get my family ahead.
In Brownsville, an increase in migrant arrivals is not something new.
The reality is, you've got thousands, more than 1,000 or 2,000 coming over every day. So they only have so many staff that can process as many individuals as they can.
Trevino says communities along the border are preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best.
People keep talking about border security or implying that the border is insecure and not safe, and I would respectfully disagree with that. Just because we've had these surges in numbers of immigrants and migrants that in and of itself has not created the border as an unsafe area. It's just created a situation that our immigration system is broken, and we've known that for more than 40 years, and yet administration or Congress after Congress continues to kick the can down, saying, let somebody else deal with it because they don't want to deal with the political fallout.
For Border Patrol officials, the mission is clear: process migrants who qualify under current asylum guidelines and quickly deport those who do not.
The border is not open. Okay, if you enter between the ports of entry, you're entering the country illegally. Okay, and you are subject to consequences. Another thing that's going to come with Title 8 are consequences. What I mean by that is that people are going to be removed. Okay, it's no longer referred to as deportation, but it's a synonym. Okay, people will be deported. They will be facing deportation with a ban of re-entry of 5 years.
For those who are able to make it to the U.S. side, the journey isn't over. Rosy Carrillo is asking for asylum. Her immigration court appointment is scheduled for May 2024. She is on her way to Atlanta.
I hope to eventually bring my children. I miss them so much. It's so hard to be separated from my family. And they're my only family, my mother, my 3 children. I have no one to help them. And if I don't work, they won't eat. My dream is to have them here.
U.S. immigration officials are urging migrants to use the CBP One app if they plan to ask for asylum. They say the next few days will be busy. Aline Barrows, VOA News, Brownsville, Texas.
Oversight groups say Title 42 allowed the U.S. to expel nearly 3 million migrants in the past 3 years. But even with it in place, the U.S. southern border was at times a chaotic mess. The Biden administration has been criticized for the nation's immigration policy. In turn, the administration shifts the blame to Congress, urging it to upgrade immigration policies. VOA's Anita Powell has this story from Washington.
The White House worked to address concerns that scenes like these could become the norm at the southern border with the lifting of Title 42. President Joe Biden's top immigration official announced a new rule under which migrants who cross between ports of entry will quickly be removed and ineligible for asylum, except in some cases. Those who make an appointment through the CBP One app will still be able to seek asylum protection.
If anyone arrives at our southern border after midnight tonight, they will be presumed ineligible for asylum and subject to steeper consequences for unlawful entry, including a minimum 5-year ban on re-entry and potential criminal prosecution.
Biden says Congress needs to do more.
I asked the Congress for a lot more money for the Border Patrol. They didn't do it. It made it harder.
Biden's opponents say he's not doing enough to keep Americans safe.
Biden border policies jeopardize national security and endanger all American families everywhere of a terrorist attack by illegal aliens.
But immigration advocates say Biden's system is too tough.
This rule will only jeopardize the lives of people seeking safety and create even more chaos and suffering at our southern border. And as the administration well knows, it's also blatantly illegal. Essentially, the new rule combines and repackages 2 Trump-era asylum bans that President Biden himself denounced on the campaign trail, and both of which were struck down as unlawful in federal court.
The administration disagrees.
This president has led the unprecedented expansion of lawful pathways. We stand markedly different than the prior administration.
As the debate rages in Washington, there's no sign the country's divided Congress will agree on new policies to address the number of migrants clamoring for a new life here in America. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
Those seeking entry to the United States often get misleading sales pitches from human smugglers called coyotes. Some immigration advocates are fighting that misinformation by explaining the legal rights migrants have and the details of U.S. immigration law. VOA's Arash Arabasadi has the inside story.
The Biden administration has implemented new asylum restrictions affecting migrants crossing to the United States without authorization. Under the policy changes, migrants crossing between ports of entry are being quickly removed through a process known as expedited removal under the Title 8 code, which is the U.S. authority that covers immigration and nationality.
I call it the asylum ban rule because it fundamentally alters everything we've understood about asylum for the past 40 or 50 years since the law was written in the 80s. In addition to that, there do appear to be some minor exemptions if you cannot use the app. There appear to be additional consequences, but it's a long rule, and so I think for the next few days, many attorneys throughout the country are going to be trying to understand it.
Those entering without authorization will also be ineligible for asylum unless they can prove they first requested protection in another country and were denied. They will also be banned from entering the U.S. for 5 years. U.S. officials and immigration advocates are advising migrants to use the mobile app launched by U.S. Customs and Border Protection in October 2020 known as CBP-1 to secure an appointment to present themselves at an official port of entry and let them know that if they cross without authorization, they will immediately be removed. Migrants with exceptionally compelling circumstances, such as an acute medical emergency, or who are victims of a severe form of human trafficking, or who face an imminent and extreme threat in Mexico, will not be barred under the new asylum restrictions. Additionally, the asylum rule does not apply to unaccompanied children or UACs. They will go through a different process. UACs are not sent back, but the Department of Health and Human Services will either place them in shelters for minors or help find a family member willing to take them. UACs go through the asylum process, but under the Special Immigrant Juvenile Services Program.
With the end of Title 42, advocates say people from all over the world keep coming and coming, and the shelters, the camps, are filling to capacity. As numbers climb, some nonprofit organizations in the town of Reynosa, Mexico, are offering assistance for the new arrivals. VOA's Victor Castillo is there along the southern border in McAllen, Texas.
Pastor Hector Silva, who operates this shelter for immigrants in Reynosa, Mexico, says that the number of people arriving at the Texas-Mexico border is nonstop.
Every day, we have between 400 to 450 people arriving.
450 están llegando. Tenemos familias chinas.
We have Chinese families, which surprises me a lot, how they are coming. We had a Chechen family. We have Russian families. And we have families from all over the world.
Due to the lack of space in shelters, some migrant families camp on the street.
It's difficult because they ask for water, food, and you don't have it.
It is made of 2 little blankets. This one we brought from Tehuchitlan, a twig that we have standing there, and, well, the other rags with stones.
Migrants lucky enough to find space in shelters cram into tents. Others have no place and stay wherever they can, sometimes in appalling conditions.
In abandoned houses, abandoned cars, on the street, there is no place to put them, even here in the camp. Also, tents are already insufficient.
In the 2 Senda de Vida shelters in Reynosa, the migrant population is over 8,500 people, according to organizers. For VOA News, Victor Hugo Castillo, McAllen, Texas.
For immigrants entering the United States, adjusting to a new culture can be daunting. In the midst of a myriad of challenges, many struggle to find physicians and proper health care. Mindful of this, a former Ukrainian immigrant opened a healthcare clinic that serves patients from 45 different countries. VOA's Svetlana Pristinska has this story from Denver, Colorado.
Ellie Titarenko knows the challenges of adjusting to life in the United States. She came to America from Ukraine in 1999. Mindful of the healthcare obstacles many immigrants face, including language and insurance, the nurse practitioner decided to open her own clinic in suburban Denver in 2021.
We were learning how to do accreditation, learning how to do marketing, learning how to work with insurance companies, learning how to run the business, learning about HR. We started with probably 2 people, and the very first patients were my office manager's children.
2 years later, in 2023, the clinic had grown to more than 4,000 patients, including Kelly Caldwell, whose parent is an immigrant, and her daughter Kalani.
I'm not just a patient, I'm a person. And so that's what I enjoy most about coming here to the clinic. They were always open for us, even if it was just a sore throat. When we called, you can get an appointment.
Dr. Ellie's nice to me because she treats people nice.
The clinic has staff members from Ukraine, Mexico, and Iran, and its patients hail from all over the world.
We take a huge pride in saying that we see patients from 40 plus different countries here. Every employee who comes from different countries brings part of their culture to us.
Patient Ania Boglino came to Colorado from Poland.
They don't just do what the book says. They follow their heart, and you can feel it in the treatments. They listen. It's not only about help with your physical body, but also your mental health.
Sarah Barahman moved to Denver from Tehran. She was a patient first, then started working at the clinic while studying physical therapy prerequisites at the local university.
Patients are people here. They're not numbers. One of the first things I noticed is our wall that has portraits of people from all over the world.
Titarenko says the clinic's main rule is to never refuse to help.
We will normally see them no matter their insurance status. If they're able to pay, we will accept their payment for the services. If they're not able to pay, we're happy to see them just to help them out.
She says it is important to let immigrants know these first challenges do not go on forever.
These are the difficult beginnings, and it's part of it. You live through it. It's just going to make you stronger.
Titarenko says she is opening a second clinic to better serve the growing immigrant community here. Svetlana Pristinska for VOA News, Denver, Colorado.
While the U.S. Mexico border continues to grapple with the influx of migrants hoping to enter the United States, Congress is debating new policies. But Republicans and Democrats have yet to agree on sensible legislation on immigration. To help shed the light on this issue, we spoke with Angela Kelly, Chief Advisor for Policy and Partnership at the American Immigration Lawyers Association and the American Immigration Council. Do you think Title 42 should have been kept? I mean, it seemed to be working, correct? Could it have been extended?
It depends whose perspective, whether it's working or not. No, I don't think it should have been kept. It was, it's a public health emergency declaration. The public health emergency is long ago over.
We haven't really seen that enormous surge that everyone predicted, right?
No, we haven't. I have to give credit to the administration for coming out with a number of policies and very clear messages that I think actually penetrated even the smuggling network. And they made it clear to people that just because Title 42 is ending does not mean that anyone is going to get to come in, that there'll be consequences if you come in through channels that are not permissible by the government's policies.
Do you think because of how strict those consequences are, the 5-year ban on you even trying again to enter this country played a role?
I do. I think that even though it is current law, that is not a new policy. It wasn't one that the administration had frankly made very clear to people. They saw the need to do that with Title 42 coming down. But to give the administration credit on the other side, they also opened up legal channels, legal pathways for people, and they saw remarkable results that when they made available a possibility of coming in lawfully, that the pressure at the southern border diminished considerably. And so what it really shows is that people want to come lawfully. If we create legal channels for them, they will utilize them. And so I think the balance is, how many legal channels, how broad and wide can they be? And this administration has got limitations on what it can do. This is where really Congress needs to step in and step up. People who come have really limited options in terms of their ability to stay, particularly if they apply for political asylum. It's a very difficult burden of proof that a person has to meet in order to be able to win asylum. Now, if they don't win and they appeal and they lose their appeal, then they are removable. They are deportable. And that'll be something that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. whether we see an increase in numbers of removals, and that will, in the administration's mind, create an additional deterrent for people. That is still an open question. We haven't had enough time without Title 42 in place. But I do think that they're smart to lead with the legal channels foot, and then we'll have to see what happens. What I think we really need to be able to do, and I think we can accomplish this, is we have to be able to better manage migration that's coming from different countries, people for different reasons, and we have to be able to offer people a meaningful chance at humanitarian protection if they qualify, and at the same time be able to manage our borders successfully so that people who don't qualify, unfortunately, are going to have to go back. But we really do need to give people a fair chance. They need to have a chance for an attorney. They need to have a chance to prepare. They need to have a chance to be sure that they're understood if they're speaking in a language that's not English, which most of the time they are. So, if we can put those safeguards in place, if we can make it so that people have a close family member in the U.S. and they can reunite with that person, if they have a needed skill in the U.S. and they could come lawfully to work, then we're creating legal channels that really serve the interests of both the immigrant and the nation. I think that's got to be the goal.
So we're talking about legal immigration and how the administration is paving the way for that. But in the meantime, that's today. There could be changes tomorrow, the day after, right? Because of these legal challenges, one in Florida, one from the ACLU, which is major. Can you explain the difference between those challenges in court?
Sure. The Florida case, a Florida judge has ordered that DHS process people at the border, not by releasing them under a provision called parole, where they're permitted to come in and they have to report to an ICE office in order to be able to be put in deportation proceedings. That is a quicker way of processing people. There's still an initial screening. We still know who they are, but it's not the full processing of putting them in deportation proceedings. And what the judge's order is that DHS can't do that, that they have to do the full, robust processing of people and giving them a notice to appear in court. The challenge there is that process takes a lot longer. And so that's where we can begin to see backups in Border Patrol stations and people growing impatient and people deciding, well, I'm going to try to come in another way. So that's the concern there. So the goal needs to be that we do a quick screening of people. Let's make sure that they're not somebody who we need to be concerned about, and that we quickly move them to where they have family who will support them, who will make sure that they show up at their ICE interview, make sure that they apply for work authorization and apply for asylum. That's what we want to do, is to be able to facilitate a fair and efficient process for people. So the lawsuit that's been filed by the ACLU is not complete yet. So I think this might be where we're going to see an additional change in policy. And that lawsuit is challenging a recent Biden administration policy that is known by some as a transit ban or an asylum ban. And it says that you can't come between a port of entry that you should have applied in a country that you transited through for asylum if you could have applied there. That's like the harsher consequence, and that what the administration is trying to do is to have people apply at ports of entry. But the real point of the transit rule is to try to encourage people to go to a port of entry, to make an appointment with an app known as CBP One. There are 1,000 appointments a day across the border, and that they come in that orderly way. That's the administration's goal. The weakness in that, the vulnerability, if you will, is that if you have a person who is fleeing persecution, who does not speak English, and is vulnerable because they have been persecuted, they have suffered, then they may not have known they could have applied for asylum in another country. That may not be a country where they're safe. And we know that conditions in northern Mexico, unfortunately, are very dangerous. So the concern is that we're going to be, in an effort to send this tough message, we're going to be turning our back on people who are truly vulnerable.
That's all for now. We hope you found today's program informative and thought-provoking. Stay up to date with all the news at voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News, and follow me on Twitter at CarolynVOA. Catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service, VOA Plus. For all those behind the scenes who brought you today's show, I'm Carolyn Pursuti. We'll see you next week for the Inside Story.